I was 26 the day my mother died, and the world suddenly got louder. The hum of the hospital lights, the squeak of rubber soles down the hallway, the metal lick of an elevator door. Everything felt turned up past 10, like grief had sandblasted my hearing raw. People hugged me and said things that bounced off my chest and fell to the floor. I remember nodding at casseroles, shaking hands I didn't recognize, and catching my reflection in a dark window. A young man in a borrowed black suit who looked like he'd just been told he was in charge of a storm. My name is Caleb Hart. I grew up in a textile town outside Charlotte, North Carolina, where our family company, Hart and Heritage, still sits on a river that once powered the South. My grandfather started with 8 looms and a dream to spin better than anyone else. My dad took us into the stadiums, athletic fabrics, performance knits, high-end towels that hotels stacked like snow. When Dad died on a factory floor accident when I was 18, my mother, Evelyn, picked up what was left and kept the heartbeat steady. She had a way of moving through the plant like a conductor, hearing flaws other people missed, the stitch that wandered, the machine bearing that would fail by Friday, the accounting line that didn't smell right. She didn't run Hart and Heritage like a queen. She ran it like a promise. She also raised me like an heir she never said out loud. I went to NC State for textile engineering because it felt like the family language. I learned airflow, tensile strength, moisture wicking. But I also learned how to stand at dawn with a cup of gas station coffee and listen to machines breathe. When Mom got sick, quietly at first, like an old furnace struggling to catch, we didn't talk about succession. She waved me off whenever I tried. "You just keep learning, baby," she'd say. "When it's time, you'll know." The week after the funeral, our extended family descended like crows, pretending to be doves, hands on shoulders, smiles a half-inch too bright, questions wrapped in sympathy. We had the official family council in Mom's office, a room that always smelled like peppermint tea and printer ink. Her chair sat empty behind the desk. The blinds were half open, letting winter sunlight stripe the carpet like a barcode. My Uncle Ray Hart, Mom's younger brother, took the head of the conference table without asking. He was in a charcoal suit that fit like it had a mortgage, hair slicked back, a gold watch that flashed like a signal. Ray was the kind of man who could sell you your own car keys if you left them on the counter. Growing up, he was Uncle Ray Ray, the fun one who bought fireworks and told stories. Somewhere along the line, Ray Ray got dropped and he started signing emails with just his first initial, like a brand. "I'll keep this brief," he said, steepling his fingers. "Hart and Heritage need steady hands. Caleb is young, and this is an emotional time. I'm proposing I step in as interim CEO for 6 months so we can navigate lenders, stabilize accounts, and evaluate strategic options." "Strategic options?" I asked. My voice sounded like someone else's. "Like what?" "We've been approached," he said, turning to me with that patient smile people use on toddlers, "by Arcadia Fabric Group out of Atlanta. They can inject capital. They can consolidate procurement. They can give us distribution muscle. In the right structure, this could save jobs." Aunt Linda bobbed her head. Cousin Terry, who had been fired twice from other jobs but somehow still showed up to vote at family meetings, mumbled, "Save jobs," like a church refrain. I kept my eyes on Ray. "And in the right structure, who's in charge?" His smile didn't move, but his eyes did. "The team that can deliver. Investors prefer experience. Everyone understands that there it was, the thing under the rug." Ray had spent years just off stage. Business development, special projects, the sort of titles that looked busy on paper and vapor in reality. He never loved thread counts or torque settings. He loved rooms with glass and his name on a placard. It's temporary, Aunt Linda said, sliding a copy of the agenda toward me as if to distract a dog with a toy. Just 6 months. 6 months is a polite way to say forever if you don't pay attention. I agreed to the interim arrangement because I didn't have the legal leverage to do otherwise, and because grief makes you soft around the edges. But I wrote the date in my phone like a nail I'd come back to hammer. 6 months to the day. Within a week, Ray fired the plant controller, a woman who'd been with us 19 years, and replaced her with a sharp-cheeked outsider named Kellen Reeves, who introduced himself like a debt collector. Firm handshake, thin smile, an expression that asked where you hid the bodies. He carried an iPad everywhere and talked about burn rate and cash waterfall, like he wanted you to know he'd been to seminars. Helen's first report made the room colder. Inventory days are ballooning. Accounts receivable past 60 days is up 31%. Utilities spiked 8% last quarter due to inefficiencies. Your maintenance budget is generous. It's not generous, I said. We run old machines because they're fixable. You either replace bearings or you replace the whole loom. We choose bearings. Kellen didn't look at me. He looked at Ray. We need a cash solution. Quickly. Then the phrase that had been hovering finally landed. A strategic partner makes sense. I started spending more time walking the plant, avoiding conference rooms that smelled like cologne and fear. The looms clattered in their familiar rhythm. The dye house steamed like a dragon's bath. The women in inspection cracked jokes and told me my tie still didn't sit straight. I took notes on a legal pad the way Mom taught me. Date at the top, 3 columns, issue, cause, action. I added a 4th for myself, truths. They weren't metrics. They were the bones you could feel even in the dark. Truth. Our Sunday towels were beating the national brand in independent lab tests for absorbency. Truth. A small outdoor brand in Colorado loved our performance knit and would triple orders if we hit color fastness on neon hues. Truth. Loyalty lives in the plant. Fear lives in the boardroom. Another truth. Rumors move faster than water. By the second week, people were whispering that I'd never worked a single real day, that Mom kept me in a bubble, that I crashed a forklift once, not true, and almost burned a batch of towels, also not true. It tasted like smoke blown deliberately. I watched Ray turn sympathetic eyes on me during meetings, and then talk in low tones in the hallway with Kellen. He printed glossy slides that showed debt lines as cliffs, and used the word unsustainable with a veteran actor's sigh. One night, after we'd run second shift to catch a late hotel order, I dragged myself upstairs to Mom's office because grief is a gravity, and that room had her orbit. The door still stuck on the threshold where the wood swelled in winter. Her teacup sat where she'd left it the last week before the hospital, a faint ring on the coaster like a ghost's fingerprint. I pulled open drawers and found nothing but pencils and Post-its and the worn leather of a family Bible we didn't open often, but didn't dare throw away. The lower right drawer didn't slide right. Something was off in the track. I knelt, ran my finger along the back panel, and felt a screw that wasn't a screw. It was a latch. The panel popped free to reveal a small black walnut box the size of a paperback, heavier than it looked. On the lid, carved so delicately I almost missed it, were 3 words. When it's time. I sat on the floor with my back against the desk. There was a 3-digit dial. Mom loved 3 numbers, my birthday, Dad's union local, and the day we opened the new finishing line. I tried the finishing line date first, April 1st, 17. Nothing. I tried Dad's union local, 236. Nothing. I tried my birthday, 92. The latch clicked like a safe exhaling. Inside, a thick envelope, a flash drive rubber banded to an index card, and a short letter in my mother's handwriting. The ink so familiar my throat tightened just looking at it. "Caleb," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. And that means the people who love the company and the people who love control are now in the same room. Only one loves the people inside the company. That one has to win." She had never written like a CEO. She wrote like a mother, telling her son to put on a jacket because the wind had teeth. She laid it out in the next paragraphs with the concision of someone who had lived through every kind of storm. 6 months earlier, when the doctors used words like aggressive and unpredictable, she moved her affairs quietly. With our family attorney, Margot Ellis, she executed a fully notarized transfer of her voting shares to me, effective upon her death or incapacity, with a conditional management proxy I could activate with a hospital letter, confirming she could no longer perform her duties. There was also a board resolution, drafted and signed by 2 independent directors she trusted, naming me successor in the event of vacancy to preserve operating continuity. The flash drive held scans. Margot had the originals. Mom wrote that she kept this set hidden, because family has a way of making business feel like betrayal even when it's protection. Then a last paragraph, shorter, like a whisper you lean in to catch. "Ray is brilliant at deals. Without love, brilliance becomes appetite. Don't hate him, don't underestimate him, and don't hand him what he didn't build. The company is not a logo, it's the people who clock in when it's still dark." I put the letter down and let the ceiling spin above me like a lazy fan. Relief hit first, a cool wave from scalp to heels. Then anger, but not the hot, flailing kind. This anger was cold and precise, like a blade you set on a whetstone. Ray hadn't just been maneuvering. He had been counting on me, not knowing I had a spine made of signatures. I scanned the documents to my laptop, hid the box back where it came from, locked Mom's office, and drove to the river because water helps me think. The old mill dam hummed. The night smelled like wet concrete and pine. I leaned on the railing and rehearsed the conversations I'd need to have without giving away that I was rehearsing anything at all. The next morning, Ray called an executive working session in the boardroom, which now felt like a stage he rented by the hour. Arcadia Fabric Group was sending 2 vice presidents for a preliminary review, which is what wolves call sniffing. Kellen laid out more spreadsheets, each one a funeral program that ended with the words, "liquidity event." I asked one question. What happens to our Gaston line if Arcadia consolidates capacity? Kellen didn't blink. They have a plant in Alabama with newer machinery. Gaston would likely be sunset. Sunset, I repeated. You mean shut down? It's a timeline issue, Kellen said. Sunsetting is a standard term. I looked at Ray. He was watching me the way a poker player watches someone count chips. Our Gaston line is the one Dad installed, I said. The folks who run it have put 2 kids each through college. They know the machines by name. Ray's smile didn't travel to his eyes. You can't lead a company with nostalgia, Caleb. And you can't sell the roof over people's heads and call it shade, I said calmly, because anger only feeds predators. We broke for lunch. In the hallway, Aunt Linda intercepted me with a hand on my sleeve. Don't be stubborn, she whispered. Ray knows money. I know fabric, I said. We make fabric, Linda. That's not the world anymore, she said, and the sadness in her voice almost undid me. The world was still the world. It still needed towels that didn't fall apart and jerseys that wicked sweat like a miracle. It still needed paychecks every Friday. That afternoon, a thin man in an Arcadia fleece vest toured the plant with Ray and Kellen, nodding like a bobblehead. He asked what our forklift lease rate was. He asked how flexible our union was. He didn't ask anyone their name. In the dye house, steam curled around him like a warning, and he didn't even look up. When they headed out to their SUVs, I walked the line of cars and memorized license plates like I could hex them. Then I drove to see attorney Margot Ellis. Her office was in an old bank building with a vault door she kept open because she thought it made clients feel safe. She was in her 60s, with a silver bob that cut straight across her jaw and a voice like a librarian who also used to fight fires. When I told the receptionist my name, Margot opened her door before the woman could finish dialing. "Come," she said, as if we were late to something important. She poured tea I didn't ask for, set it down, and looked at me the way my mother did when she didn't want the preface, only the truth. I showed her the letter, and she didn't reach for it right away. Evelyn had good instincts, she said. She knew how to leave a map. "I have the scans," I said. "You have the originals?" She nodded. "Safe and accessible. Here's where you breathe. Your mother's documents are clean. They were signed before her condition progressed. 2 witnesses present, notarized. The board resolution is sound. What you need to know is when to pull the lever." "What lever?" I asked, even though I knew. "The management proxy and the voting control," she said. "If Ray tries to force a sale or make material changes, you assert both. If he proceeds without board majority, we go to court. If he tries to alter the board, we get an injunction. But you'll need the hospital attestation for the conditional piece if anyone claims you jumped the gun." "She's gone," I said softly, and the room tilted for a second. "Isn't that attestation automatic?" "It exists," Margot said gently, "but it's not just a piece of paper. It's a brick. When you throw it, you don't get a do-over. Timing becomes strategy." "Ray set a family council next Thursday," I said. "He's going to pitch Arcadia. He'll put up scary graphs and talk about sunsetting people like they're porch lights. If I show up empty-handed, he steamrolls us." Margot leaned back, steepling fingers the way Ray did, but without the smarm. "Evelyn didn't hide those documents so you could wave them around like a parade banner. She wanted you to hold a line they couldn't see until they hit it." "I get that," I said. "But if I wait too long—" "You won't," she said. "We'll prep a packet. We'll notice the board formally that you hold voting control. We'll file at the county deed office to update corporate records. We'll secure an emergency board meeting for the morning of his pitch, not to blow him up, but to recenter governance. I'll be there. You'll be calm, and you'll speak about people, not percentages. Investors secretly like that. It smells like longevity." On my way out, she stopped me with a question at the door. "Are you angry at your uncle?" "Yes," I said. "Good," she said. "Don't let it drive." Anger is a toddler with a steering wheel. I spent the next 2 nights at the plant, not because there was anything glorious about sleeping on a couch that remembered 1,000 behinds, but because I needed the rhythm. I walked first shift at 5, second shift at 3, and the dead zone at 2 in the morning when every noise feels like a plot. I talked to the Gaston crew leader about bearing noise on Loom 8. I watched the towel line cut and fold, the blades whispering through fabric like a magician's trick. I sat with the inspection ladies and listened to gossip the way a general listens to scouts. The gist: Kellen thinks we're lines on a ledger. Ray smiles like a politician. Arcadia's floor manager asked how many people we can lay off without a riot. I told them the truth I could tell. "We're not dead," I said. "We're not for sale." Saying it out loud made my chest unclench. By Wednesday, the Arcadia folks were back with a draft term sheet. Kellen printed it on heavy paper like a wedding invitation. It promised capital efficiency and synergy mapping and optimization of labor resources. In the footnotes, tucked beneath a table like a rat, was the sentence, Arcadia to assume executive control over operations and procurement within 90 days of close. Executive control. That wasn't partnership, that was a gutting. I took a copy to Margot. She circled that line twice in red and wrote, "This is the takeover." That night I went home to the house I grew up in, walked into Mom's room like it still belonged to her, and sat on the edge of the bed with the black walnut box on my lap. I ran my thumb over the words, "when it's time," until the skin warmed with friction. My phone buzzed with emails I didn't open. The house ticked as heat kicked through vents. I could almost hear Mom in the kitchen, clinking plates, humming Al Green like she did when she thought no one listened. I opened the box, read her letter again, and then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I prayed, not for victory, not for revenge, but for clarity, because clarity is what lets you swing without flinching. In the morning, I shaved with razor focus, tied a tie that actually sat straight, and drove to the plant slowly, like a man stepping into a fight he couldn't avoid. When I walked in, Kellen was in the lobby with a binder and a face that said he enjoyed this part, the part where he got to play surgeon on a company while the patient watched. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "Bigger than you think," I said, and we both smiled, but only one of us meant it. At noon, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We should talk. LP." Then a second text. "Lawrence Pierce, Arcadia board." I stared at the screen long enough to taste metal. I stepped outside into the winter sun, called him back, and listened. "This isn't off the record," he said without preamble. "But it isn't on it either. I've seen your line. I know good fabric. I also know power moves. Your uncle is trying to buy himself a throne with someone else's house. If you've got a better story, tell it. Investors like me don't mind a fight if the numbers make sense." "I have a story in numbers," I said. "And people." "Bring all three," he said. "I'll be at the back of the room." He hung up. I stood there with my phone in my hand and the river wind sneaking up my sleeves. For the first time since the funeral, I laughed, not because anything was funny, because momentum had turned an inch, and sometimes an inch is all you need to wedge a door. That night, I drafted a presentation I hadn't planned to give. It wasn't glossy. It had 5 sections: where we are, what we make, what we can fix fast, what we won't sell, and what we need to grow. I used pictures of the line chiefs next to throughput graphs. I put the neon color fastness target in bold and the Colorado brand's conditional PO in the appendix. At the top of slide 1, I typed a sentence I could say without choking. "We're not a distressed asset. We're a disciplined family company with underutilized strengths." Then I called Margot to confirm the filings were in motion. They were. Then I slept 3 hours and dreamed of looms breathing like lungs. On Thursday morning, the family council gathered in the plant's training room because the conference center was booked. Folding chairs, stacks of paper cups, coffee that tasted like courage, and burnt beans. Arcadia arrived in navy blazers. Kellen wore triumph like cologne. Ray moved through the room shaking hands, a man who loved a podium more than he loved oxygen. I sat 2 rows back with a folder on my knees, Mom's letter folded flat beneath the documents Margot had couriered. The certificate of share transfer, the proxy, the hospital's attestation, the stamped county filing, ink so fresh it still had a sheen. Ray cleared his throat, clicked his PowerPoint, and smiled his $1,000,000 lie. "Family," he began. "Today we secure our future." I folded my hands so he wouldn't see them shake, felt the grain of the folder under my palms, and thought of my mother's 3 words carved into walnut. When it's time, the training room smelled of paper and coffee grinds. Ray's slides painted a picture of doom dressed up in corporate buzzwords. Every chart leaned downward, every arrow pointed to collapse. He was good, I'll give him that. He made numbers feel like monsters under the bed. People shifted in their folding chairs, their faith eroding by the second. That was Ray's gift. He could make you doubt the floor under your own shoes. Arcadia's men sat in the front row with polite predator smiles. They looked like bankers on safari, scanning the herd for the weakest calf. Their suits whispered as they leaned toward each other, murmuring approval at Ray's presentation. Kellen hovered near the projector, clicking slides like an executioner pulling levers. Ray paused dramatically at one slide labeled Unsustainable Path. He let silence hang like a noose. Then he leaned forward, gripping the podium. If we do nothing, Hart and Heritage is finished in 18 months. If we sell to Arcadia, we protect jobs, secure benefits, and preserve a legacy that otherwise dies with us. He let that last phrase echo. People shifted uncomfortably, and I could see heads nodding. Fear works fast. Fear is gasoline, and Ray was flicking matches. My chest was tight, but not from fear anymore. From anger, the cold, hard kind, the kind that feels like a blade pressed against stone. I looked down at the folder in my lap, Mom's letter folded inside, and felt her words pulse. The company is not a logo. It's the people who clock in when it's still dark. When Ray clicked to his next steps slide, 3 bullet points about finalizing the Arcadia partnership, I stood up. The chair squeaked. The sound was louder than it should have been, and heads turned. Ray's smile faltered, just slightly. "Uncle," I said, my voice carrying more steel than I expected. "You've spoken about fear. You've spoken about collapse. Let's speak about truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Ray chuckled, trying to recapture the stage. "Caleb, this isn't the time for—" "It's exactly the time," I cut in. "Because you're not telling the whole story." I stepped forward, the folder in my hand like a loaded weapon. I set it down on the table beside the projector. 6 months ago, while you were circling the boardrooms of Atlanta, my mother was putting this company's future in writing. Evelyn Hart wasn't confused. She wasn't naive. She knew what family can do when money smells like blood. I opened the folder. The documents gleamed under fluorescent light. "These," I said, "transfer her voting shares directly to me. Effective upon her death. They are notarized. They are witnessed. They are filed with the county. Which means, legally and presently, I am the controlling shareholder of Hart and Heritage." Gasps scattered through the room. Ray's face drained of color. Kellen stiffened like someone had slapped him. "And if that weren't enough," I continued, sliding another page forward, "here's the board resolution naming me a successor CEO in the event of vacancy. 2 independent directors signed it. The law recognizes it, which means, Ray, you are not interim anything. You are a man standing at a podium that no longer belongs to you." The silence was absolute. Even the Arcadia suits froze, their smiles turning brittle. I could feel their calculus shifting. Was this young man bluffing, or did he just flip the table? Ray found his voice. This is outrageous," he sputtered. "Those documents, anyone can forge." "They're authenticated," I said evenly. "And our family attorney, Margot Ellis, is prepared to confirm it in court. In fact, filings have already been made." I held up the stamped county certificate. The ink glistened. "This isn't a bluff. This is law." The room buzzed like an electrical storm. Aunt Linda whispered something frantic to her husband. Cousin Terry looked like he'd swallowed a stone. The Arcadia men leaned forward now, suddenly attentive. And at the back of the room, I caught the eyes of Lawrence Pierce, the Arcadia board member who'd texted me. He gave the smallest of nods, as if to say, "Now you're in the game." Ray tried to recover. He slammed his palm on the podium. "Listen to me. Caleb is a child. He's never run anything. He crashed a forklift. Lies," I cut in. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "Rumors you spread. I've walked every line in this plant. I've spoken to every shift. I've solved problems you didn't even see because you don't come down from the boardroom. This isn't about my age. It's about my spine. And I'm telling you, this company is not for sale." The words hung heavy. For a moment, no one breathed. Then I clicked my laptop open and projected my own slides. They weren't polished, no glossy charts, just pictures of workers next to throughput graphs, photos of machines, quotes from customers, real things. "This is where we actually stand," I said, pointing to the numbers. "Our towels outperform the national brand. Independent tests prove it. Our performance knits are growing. Orders are ready if we solve the neon color fastness issue, which we're weeks away from fixing. And this," I flipped to the next slide, showing the conditional purchase order from the Colorado brand, "is 3 times our current outdoor contract if we deliver. That's real revenue, not projections, not smoke." People leaned in. For the first time, they were seeing not fear, but possibility. I pressed on. Ray's story is collapse. Mine is continuity. His is surrender. Mine is fight. I turned to the room. Hart and Heritage is not a distressed asset. We are a disciplined family company with underutilized strengths. We don't need Arcadia to gut us. We need discipline, clarity, and leadership that gives a damn about the people who clock in when it's still dark. Applause started small, from the back, where the inspection ladies sat. Then it spread, scattered at first, then swelling. Not everyone clapped. Aunt Linda looked horrified, but enough did to shift the air. Ray's face was a mask of fury barely held together. He leaned into the mic. "This boy is playing hero with documents he doesn't understand. Investors don't bet on sentiment. They bet on strength." And then, from the back of the room, Lawrence Pierce stood up. His Arcadia vest looked suddenly like camouflage. "He's right about one thing," Pierce said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Investors do bet on strength. And strength isn't selling the floor out from under your own people. It's fixing what's broken and building what works." I've seen the line. The kid's got a point. The shock was instant. An Arcadia board member siding, at least partially, with me. Ray stammered, You can't. This is..." But Pierce was already walking out, leaving silence in his wake. I knew then. The tide had turned. Not won, not yet, but turned. The meeting dissolved into chaos, shouting, side conversations, frantic phone calls. Ray stormed out, Kellen trailing him like a shadow. The Arcadia men slipped away, their predatory confidence shaken. Family members argued in corners, some furious, some relieved. And me? I just stood there, holding Mom's letter in my pocket, feeling her hand on my shoulder like she'd never left. That night, my phone blew up. Emails, texts, threats from Ray, pleas from relatives, questions from reporters who'd caught wind of internal conflict at historic Hart and Heritage. The story was leaking faster than I could contain it. But beneath the noise, I felt something steady. For the first time since the funeral, I wasn't just reacting, I was leading. The next morning, I walked into the plant and people actually cheered. Not loud, not everyone, but enough. The inspection ladies hugged me. The Gaston crew leader slapped my back. A machinist with grease on his hands said, "About time someone told Ray to shove it." It wasn't victory. It was belief. And belief is oxygen. But Ray wasn't done. He never was. By evening, I got a letter from his attorney threatening to contest the transfer, to challenge the board resolution, to freeze operations pending litigation. It was pure intimidation, designed to rattle me. But Margot just smiled when she read it. "They can contest all they want," she said. "The documents are airtight. What they can't fight is perception, so expect him to come after that." She was right. The next week, rumors started again. Stories that I was reckless, naive, a puppet for outside forces. Ray fed the local business journal a narrative about family disagreements and youthful inexperience. He wanted to paint me as a child playing king, and for a moment it worked. Banks got nervous. Vendors called asking if orders would be honored. Fear started creeping back in like mold in the walls. That's when I realized legal documents weren't enough. Numbers weren't enough. If I wanted to truly lead, I had to win not just the argument, but the story. And stories, Mom always said, are stronger than steel. So I made a decision. At the next community meeting, with workers, families, and local press in attendance, I would tell the whole truth. Not just about contracts and term sheets, but about my uncle's betrayal, about my mother's letter, about the fight for the soul of Hart and heritage. It was a gamble, but then again, everything worth saving always is. The community hall smelled of fried chicken and dust, the kind of place where Little League sign-ups happened in spring, and bingo nights filled the seats on Fridays. But tonight, the folding chairs were packed with workers, their families, retirees in worn company jackets, even a few curious reporters with notepads balanced on their knees. The air buzzed with whispers, anticipation, doubt. I stood at the front, no podium, no microphone, just me and the hum of fluorescent lights. I wanted them to see me as I was, not as Ray's caricature of a reckless boy. "My name's Caleb Hart," I began, steadying my voice against the weight of hundreds of eyes. "I'm 26 years old. My mother, Evelyn Hart, gave her life to this company. Not just her years, her health, her sleep, her bones." I paused, letting the words settle. "And before she passed, she wrote me a letter. In it, she said, 'The company is not a logo. It's the people who clock in when it's still dark. That's you. That's us.' That's what she asked me to protect." I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out the worn envelope. I held it up, high enough for the front rows to see. This letter gave me strength to challenge my uncle's plan to sell Hart and heritage to Arcadia. "And it's why I stand here tonight," the crowd murmured. I unfolded the pages slowly, the paper trembling just slightly in my hands. Then I read aloud, "Caleb, you will face pressure to fold, to surrender. They'll tell you the company is too weak, too broken. But remember, our strength was never in buildings or bank accounts. It's in the hands of people who care enough to build something with pride, protect them, fight for them, even if you stand alone." By the time I finished, the room was silent. Not the silence of indifference, but the kind that presses on your skin, that waits for a match to strike. I lowered the letter. I know what's being said about me. That I'm inexperienced, that I'm reckless, that I'm just a kid with a piece of paper. Maybe some of that's true. I don't have 30 years in boardrooms. But I have 30 years of this town in my veins, and I'd rather fail fighting for it than succeed selling it to men who see you as numbers on a spreadsheet. That cracked the silence. Applause started near the back, swelling forward until the whole room shook with it. Some shouted, That's right. Others wiped their eyes. Even the reporters scribbled harder, sensing a story that was bigger than quarterly earnings. But applause doesn't erase enemies. Because the very next morning, Ray struck back. I woke to headlines in the Orlando Business Journal. Family rift threatens Hart and heritage stability. The article quoted Ray extensively, calling me unprepared, emotional, and vulnerable to outside manipulation. He claimed I'd forged documents, manipulated sentiment, and was using Mom's death for leverage. He painted me as a usurper. And worse, he implied I had outside financial backers pulling my strings. My phone lit up with worried texts. A vendor emailed, threatening to pull a contract. A banker called, voice icy, asking for reassurances. Ray had played his move, poison the well. Make me look unstable, make me look like a child playing CEO, while he, the seasoned uncle, was the responsible adult. But what Ray didn't know was that I'd already anticipated this. Because 2 days earlier, Margot, our attorney, had quietly filed the official ownership transfer with the state and secured an injunction preventing any sale of the company without my consent. Legally, I was locked in. Ray couldn't claw me out with op-eds or press conferences. His only weapon now was perception. Still, perception can ruin you faster than any contract. That night, I found myself staring at the old factory floor from my office window. Machines hummed. Workers moved with quiet rhythm, unaware, or maybe fully aware, of the storm swirling above them. My chest felt heavy. Was I doing the right thing? Was I dragging them into chaos just to prove a point? The sound of the elevator dinged behind me. When I turned, Lawrence Pierce stepped out, his Arcadia badge tucked into his pocket. The man who'd broken ranks in that boardroom. "You're learning fast," he said, his voice low. "But Ray's not finished. He'll try to bleed you through perception until you beg for peace." "Then why are you here?" I asked, suspicion sharp in my tone. "Because," Pierce said, leaning against the window, "I've seen Arcadia gut too many companies. And your uncle's arrogance makes him sloppy. He promised us total control, but he can't deliver it. You, however, might." I stiffened. "If you're here to buy me off—" "Not buy," Pierce interrupted. "Partner, quietly. There are investors who believe in stability, not strip mining. If you hold your ground, you can rebuild this company without Arcadia. But you need capital. And you need to play smarter than Ray." I narrowed my eyes. "Why tell me this?" He smirked. "Because betting on arrogance is bad business. And betting on conviction, sometimes that pays." When he left, he slipped me a card. On the back, a handwritten number, his private line. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was a war with investors, with banks, with sharks who smelled blood. Ray wasn't my only enemy. But maybe, just maybe, I had allies too. The following week was a blur of court filings, press inquiries, vendor calls. I worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping. Every time I started to crack, I touched Mom's letter and kept moving. Workers rallied. Some even volunteered unpaid hours to fix backlogged orders just to prove the company was alive. Their faith was gasoline to my fire. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. At a Friday press conference, Ray stood beside Kellen and announced they were suing me personally for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Cameras flashed. He looked calm, confident. Then he pulled out a photograph. Me standing with Pierce outside the factory. The caption read, "Young CEO, secretly courting Arcadia board member." Reporters swarmed me that night. The story hit the wires before midnight. Ray had spun the photo into proof that I was conspiring with Arcadia, that I'd lied to everyone. The very investors Pierce had spoken about now wavered. Banks froze lines of credit. Even some workers started whispering, "What if Ray's right?" It felt like the ground opened under me. I hadn't lied, but perception was poison. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I sat in my mother's old chair, the letter open in my lap, and whispered out loud, "What do I do now, Mom?" The answer came not in words, but in resolve. I would not beg, I would not fold, and I would not let Ray rewrite the story of my life. So I made a plan. At the upcoming court hearing, instead of just defending myself, I would reveal everything: the backroom deals, the pressure tactics, the way Ray had manipulated numbers and fed lies to the press. And I would bring receipts, emails Margot and I had uncovered showing Ray coordinating with Arcadia months before Mom's death, trying to push her aside. It was dangerous. If I lost, I'd be ruined. But if I won, if I told the story truthfully, publicly, in a room that mattered, then maybe, just maybe, justice would finally catch up with Betrayal. The date was set, March 18th, the day everything would burn or be rebuilt. And when I walked into that courthouse, the halls buzzing with reporters, cameras flashing like fireworks, I knew this was no longer about a company. This was about survival. The courthouse felt like a stage, every marble column and echoing footstep amplifying the tension. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones lunging forward like bayonets. Flashbulbs popped as I pushed through the doors, flanked by Margot and two paralegals hauling boxes of documents. Inside, the air was heavy. Wood-paneled walls, the low hum of whispered gossip, the shuffling of papers that felt like the rustle of anticipation. My uncle sat at the plaintiff's table, sharp as a blade in a tailored gray suit, his smile thin but confident. Beside him, Kellen leaned back smugly, already savoring the taste of victory. I took my seat, every eye in the gallery drilling into me, searching for signs of weakness. The judge entered, gavel cracking against the wood. The trial began. Ray's attorney went first. He painted me as reckless, dishonest, colluding with Arcadia to destabilize the company. He held up the photograph of me and Pierce, waving it like a bloody flag. "This young man is a danger to Hart and Heritage," the lawyer thundered. "He hides behind a letter and sentiment, but the truth is, he lacks the discipline and integrity to lead. He has betrayed the workers, the board, and the very legacy he claims to defend." The gallery murmured, heads nodding, some reporters scribbling furiously. It stung, every word a dagger. But I kept my expression calm, hands folded, eyes steady on the judge. Because I knew my turn was coming. When Margot rose, the shift was immediate. Her voice was calm, deliberate, every syllable landing like a stone in still water. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about reckless youth or forged sentiment. It is about betrayal. It is about greed. And it is about the truth my client's late mother foresaw with remarkable clarity." She opened a folder and laid down Exhibit A, the original letter, notarized and confirmed by handwriting experts. The judge adjusted her glasses, scanning the pages, nodding slightly. Margot continued. "Mr. Ray Hart would have you believe this letter is nothing but sentiment. But the reality is, Evelyn Hart anticipated this very moment. She knew her brother's ambition, and she protected her son not just with words, but with law. Here is the official transfer of controlling shares, executed months before her passing." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the reporters paused their pens. The judge leaned forward. Ray's face tightened, a flicker of unease breaking his mask. But Margot wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she said, her voice sharpening, "we submit into evidence communications between Mr. Ray Hart and Arcadia executives, dated as early as last year, conspiring to force Evelyn Hart out of her role. These include emails, meeting notes, and wire transfer receipts documenting payments made to certain board members in exchange for their loyalty." The gallery erupted. Shocked whispers, someone even audibly gasped. Ray's attorney sputtered, objecting furiously. But the judge silenced him with a rap of the gavel. "The evidence will be admitted," she said firmly. I glanced at Ray then. For the first time, his composure cracked. His eyes darted toward Kellen, whose smugness had drained into a pale grimace. Margot turned to the jury. "This case is not about a young man betraying his legacy. It is about a legacy nearly stolen from him. And it is about a mother's wisdom that reached beyond the grave to protect not just her son, but every worker who depends on Hart and Heritage for their livelihood." When she sat, the silence was electric. Then it was my turn. I rose, the weight of the room pressing against me. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, steady, deliberate. "My uncle says I'm reckless. Maybe I am. I was 26, suddenly holding a company older than me. But what I'm not is a liar, and what I refuse to be is a coward." I walked toward the jury box, letter still in my hand. This isn't just paper. This was my mother's voice. She knew him better than I ever did, and she knew he would try to turn her life's work into his piggy bank. She warned me to fight, not for myself, for the people who clock in at dawn, who make this company more than a ledger. I turned, locking eyes with Ray. "You tried to steal from them. You tried to steal from me, but you forgot one thing. Paper cuts deeper than greed when it's signed in truth." I let the words hang, then returned to my seat. The judge gave instructions. The jury retired. Every second of deliberation felt like a hammer beating in my chest. The gallery buzzed with speculation, reporters whispering predictions. Ray sat stiff, eyes locked forward, jaw clenched. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood, unfolding the verdict slip. His voice was calm, but carried like thunder. "We, the jury, find in favor of the defendant, Caleb Hart. The court recognizes his rightful ownership and leadership of Hart and Heritage. Furthermore, we recommend investigation into Mr. Ray Hart's conduct for breach of fiduciary duty and potential fraud." The gallery exploded. Reporters surged for the door. Workers in attendance cheered. Some even cried. I sat frozen, the words washing over me like a tide I'd been swimming against for months. Then it hit me. I had won. Not just the case, not just the company. I had won my mother's faith, fulfilled her final request. Ray shot to his feet, shouting, "This isn't over!" But the judge's gavel silenced him. Bailiffs closed in as Kellen whispered urgently in his ear, their empire of lies crumbling under the weight of evidence. I stood, letter still clutched in my hand, and felt the strangest thing, not triumph, not revenge, but release. The weight was gone. Outside, cameras flashed, questions flew. "How do you feel? What's next for Hart and Heritage? Will you press charges against your uncle?" I paused on the courthouse steps, sunlight warming my face. "This isn't about revenge," I said, my voice steady. "This is about justice." My mother believed in truth. Today, truth won. And tomorrow, we rebuild, not for me, but for everyone who makes this company what it is. The crowd erupted again, but I barely heard them. I looked skyward, imagining Mom's voice in the wind. I told you, Caleb, protect them, even if you stand alone. I whispered back, just loud enough for myself. I didn't stand alone, Mom. You stood with me. Always. And with that, I walked forward, not as the boy they doubted, not as the pawn Ray tried to control, but as a man who had faced betrayal, endured the storm, and stepped out carrying not just a company, but a legacy. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying your enemy, it's proving them powerless against the truth.